Revolution that liberates people is an amazing thing, but that carnage that's going on in Syria was driven by climate change. So what we're talking about is not just sort of food running out and people starving to death. We're talking about food running out, people starving to death, and fighting like crazy increasingly over the remaining resources. So hopefully that has given you a picture of the climate change as a real existential, genuine human life and death issue. What can we do about it? And Naomi Klien's point is that there are basically two ways to go from here. What it seems the power system is doing, it knows about climate change, it's profiting off fossil fuels as much as possible, doing everything it possibly can to prevent moving away from fossil fuels, but there will come a time where it becomes absolutely undeniably obvious to people who are sufficiently organised across the world to say climate change has to be dealt with, we have to move away from fossil fuels, but things are that bad already and will be that much worse when that happens that it will be the excuse for the kind of green imperialism I talked about already in terms of the land grabbing, etc. It will be an excuse for that to go on to steroids, and it will basically be like, this is an existential threat, we can't leave this to democracy, we have to deal, this is the one spaceship, if you're on a spaceship you'd need a captain on that spaceship, wouldn't you? So we can't have, we can't have democracy. What Naomi Klien is saying is, we have a choice from here. Either it's green imperialism that probably will do fuck all to help the planet and the environment, because it'll be too late anyway, but it will be used as the most sort of all-encompassing pretext for those in power to grab even more power and to lock up the global system. What she's saying, and what many others have been saying for years, is that we have, out of this kind of lose-lose scenario that I might have terrified you a little bit with, but you're probably terrified already on some level, what we have potentially is a win-win scenario to get out of it, which is a massive kind of democratic revolution and transformation of the entire global political economy along ecological lines. There are some things that are very fundamental to dealing with climate change that go absolutely against the interests of powerful corporations. What Naomi Klien makes clear is that the reason the right wing has dedicated hundreds of millions of dollars, in fact, to funding climate denial and propaganda to get people to believe it's not happening, is that the right wing caught on much more quickly than the left to the fact that climate change is the greatest, most systemic example of the failure of the neoliberal system. The failure of a system that says, leave it to the market, it will be fine. Leave it to the market and it will be fine has actually led to this unimaginable threat to all future existence. So that is why they are funding the climate denial. And the first chapter of her book is called Why the Right is Right. And obviously she's saying they're not right about the science. 97% of scientists are very clear that this is a major threat. At least 30% of the scientists, as I understand it, are saying that we're actually far further forward in terms of the problem than the consensus holds, and it's literally 2 or 3% on the other hand saying, it's not so much of a problem. And those 2 or 3% are invariably paid for by the fossil fuel industry. But so the long and the short is we need this unprecedentedly fast transformation of the entire global economy to be one that is ecological. If you're transporting things thousands of miles around the world, which could be made down the road, then obviously that's not something that is very helpful for climate change. So the entire market fundamentalist globalized model, which is about transporting things thousands of miles away, it's about your shirt kind of having the buttons put on in Poland and then being driven 2,000 miles to have the stitches sewn in somewhere else, etc. Kind of so-called efficiency, but decided purely in the interest of short-term profit for the companies. Nothing to do with efficiency in terms of resources. Nothing to do with actually, efficiency in terms of providing decent, democratic, socially desirable, livable outcomes for people. But so the point that she's making is that if we embrace climate change as A, the existential threat it is, but B, the opportunity to rein in corporations, to take back government power and direct it to a genuine localized democracy, where the power over how we kind of transform our local communities to be viable in terms of how we're living relative to the planet on which we depend. These are all means by which we would have to reverse the current power system where the 1% has taken everything. Just to touch on equality very briefly, clearly if you've got a finite amount of stuff that you can do in the world without destroying it, the idea of a sort of infinitely growing pie from which eventually some wealth will trickle down, that goes off the table immediately. As soon as you say, okay, we've got finite resources, immediately the first question is, okay, well how do we share them fairly and equally and democratically. So this system of rampaging inequality comes immediately onto the table as soon as you start thinking about any remotely just way to deal with climate change. So they understand that actually all of us embracing climate change as not only the existential threat that it is, but the ultimate coordinating and organising principle that can get a historically divided left on the same page and working towards viable solutions. They recognise that, and we have to. This whole sort of debate that I guess to some extent has been happening in this camp, not so much, but certainly happens throughout progressive movements about kind of reform versus revolution, that goes out of the window as well. If we accept the timelines of climate, which is we have to transform the world pretty much overnight, you know, that gets rid of the argument that, oh well, maybe we should do sort of small grassroots things and it may not be quick, but eventually things will kind of spread and, you know, eventually we'll get a nice kind of anarchist stroke democratic world. That goes off the table. Similarly, you know, for reasons already discussed in terms of how the power system is trying to, will end up using this on its own behalf, the idea of just kind of having, you know, pushing for climate change coming from the top, climate change policy coming from the top, that goes out the window. So essentially what we're left with is a kind of absolute existential requirement for a sort of yin-yang approach to revolution where we organise on the ground, absolutely, we build critical masses for change, but those movements are geared very consciously to the strategic approach to how we take the reins of power, supposedly democratic power, back from the 1% and take those reins back into our own hands, use the unprecedented resources, technology and communications capacity to bring about this kind of giant green revolution, Marshall Plan for the world, etc. So I hope that we can I think there is a very strong feeling that climate change is central to what we're doing, but I think it's significant that it hasn't really been mentioned much in this week, other than in passing, because it is such a sort of enormous overarching issue that it can very easily become invisible. So I guess my call is to make sure that whatever we do, we keep that front and centre. But her other point is that by focusing on the kind of economic justice issues that are central to providing the solutions, the democratic solutions to climate change, you actually speak to people that maybe might not get climate change as a big issue because they're desperate for, you know, they're desperate about how they're going to heat or eat or whatever it is. You know, so by linking all these struggles together, we have an unprecedented pretext in history for a vast, coordinated movement for huge change very, very quickly. So that's the climate change. The other thing that, and this is partly because various slightly mainstream organisations that are doing good work on democratic reform, because of the politics of those institutions, representatives of those groups have not come down to the camp because it's seen as contentious and all the rest of it. But there was a lot of discussion in the organising group for this, that something like a huge constitutional assembly to come up with a genuine democratic constitution that decentralises power and puts it in the hands of ordinary people across society, as opposed to the system we have at the moment, is a really good idea and something that we should push for. Things like reforming party funding that are just a kind of no-brainer. The basic theory of this. Go into this in the demands. Yeah. I mean, we are going to go into this in demands, but it's worth covering it just very briefly. Sorry.
If you're going to cover it later, please.
But in the assembly. So just a list of things that would seem to me to be no-brainers, but we're going to go into discussing this in the assembly in terms of where next and what our demands are. Reform party funding, proportional representation system where the number of votes in Parliament corresponds to the number of votes for a party. So if 10% of people vote for the Green Party, they get 10% of the MPs. That would not just be a fairer system, but it would immediately unravel this crazy anti-democratic system that is just about, you know, the political parties appealing to 40 marginal seats in the middle and coming up with policies that appeal to a tiny section of the middle class and that are nothing to do with the needs of 40-50% of people.
Right, guys, I know that you've been really patient listening to our last speaker who ended up going over an awful lot, but again we're sharing a lot of interesting ideas with us, and I'm sure George would like to share a lot of other interesting ideas with us, but thank you, George.